Welcome back to another episode of Projecting Grandeur. I am your host, Ron Dichter, and I'm pumped today. We have a really cool and exciting guest with us that is somebody who truly understands the power of aligning vision with action. Michelle Griffin is the founder and CEO of Griffin Resources. She's an innovative business solutions provider based out of Tampa, Florida. Michelle, welcome to Projecting Grandeur.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. It's exciting. Well, I'm going to jump right into it. So Michelle, before Griffin Resources became what it is today, what sparked the idea for you to start your own business?
Well, I actually wanted to be an independent contractor. I was a HR practitioner and always kind of in the leadership area of that. And when I was getting my doctorate, I had decided that it was unfair to focus on my doctorate while, being an HR director. And so I worked out an exit strategy with the business that I was in order to kind of pursue my doctorate and work kind of like hourly as a consultant. And very quickly, in speaking with business owners, they didn't want to be told what to do about HR. They just said, we'll give you an email address and you do it. And so that's kind of where the brainchild of that went. So I, kind of followed the lead of the business owners. And within a few months, I had 8 clients and hired 2 full-time people. And it kind of like built into a company from there. But my initial idea was that it would just kind of simply be something that I could do while I was in school. And then I just kind of did both and worked into that full time and then built a company out of that, just purely out of demand and following what business owners were kind of saying that they wanted for an HR function.
Yeah. Listen, as a 5-time entrepreneur, I can tell you HR is something that scares us business owners. And so having somebody like you, I can understand why they said, here's an email and go for it. Prior to doing this, you worked obviously in corporate leadership roles before you became a founder. What are some of the lessons from those early, positions that shaped the way that you lead?
It really shaped quite a bit about my passion for HR and business in general. So one of the companies I was at was in the tech space, and when I started, there were only about 300 people in the company, which is still very large. And when I left, there was 850 people across 10 states and 4 countries, and I ran HR for all of it. And so I really got to understand the different, employment laws and regulations and expansions and benefits and everything, regarding everything people across multiple different countries. And I had a lot of resources at my fingertips. The everything from the broker to 401k, all of the resources that we had were literally at our beck and call. And I realized after I left there, I went to a company that had 100 people in one state and obviously did not have as many resources. The vendors that they were working with were, not as supportive. And what I wanted to do once I started building this was take those resources that I was so used to having and bring those to small to mid-sized businesses. So I started networking and finding, other business owners and vendors that were willing to cater to small to mid-sized businesses so that I could take what I had learned and make that available to other businesses. And so that's really what I was able to accomplish. So small businesses can offer, benefits. They're going to get benefit support. They're going to get 401k and retirement support or anything else that they can start to afford so that they can, compete for top talent when, there really is a lot of competition out there.
Absolutely. This next question I think is going to hit home with a lot of our entrepreneurs that are maybe a little further out the gate. But I tell you what, talent acquisition and recruitment is one of the hardest things that I think business owners deal with. And I know that at Griffin Resources, you guys take a really deeply strategic approach to recruitment. Can you walk us through how you align talent acquisition with a client's long-term vision?
Yeah, so this I'm going to get a little nerdy about because that's actually what my degree is in. So my doctorate is in something called industrial organizational psychology. and that is the research degree behind the effectiveness of human capital. And so if you were to think of, behavioral assessments, communication assessments, all those like tools and, not like to call them tests, they really are assessments. That's all built by IO psychologists. And so a lot of what I had researched in my higher education was the validity of hiring the right people and obviously making sure you've got the right people in the right seats and you've identified what those seats are. So we tend to work with a lot of our clients, obviously, if they're willing to, and we pick up pieces and parts depending on which part of the process they want to keep versus which ones they want us to work with them. So we stay very, very flexible and don't overstep, but also don't charge for things they don't want. And so if they would like to use assessments and would like to make sure that they're doing a valid process, then we, start coming up with the candidate experience that's going to be right for that company and for that industry. And so we'll put in, specific types of behavioral assessments. We'll create a job match profile so that the people that we're looking for, we know exactly what kind of role that they should be fitting into, and we can assess that. Also, structured interviews make things very valid. And then also making sure that we are setting the new hire up for success and that they have the onboarding process in place and that the company is ready to bring them on. And so we also want to make sure that the people in the company, their career path is aligning with the company's vision. And so everyone is kind of growing together. And so there's kind of like the entire life cycle of the employee, obviously starting from the candidate experience and the recruiting process all the way in through, their career path in the company versus the strategic growth plan of the company and aligning all of that together.
Wow. Okay. Yes, I can see you got deep in the weeds there, but that's pretty cool how that all plays together. And I think that ties into my next question, which your model in general, like the way you operate, is very unique. Fractional, hourly, no monthly retainers. Like, how did you arrive at this structure, and like what is it? Why does it resonate so well with your clients?
I evolved over the years, really listening to the business owners and staying really flexible and relevant because of that. Obviously, no one likes to be tied into contracts. They don't want to say, well, you have to pay through the remainder of the year, or you have certain retainers and you have a monthly minimum. I've tried all those different types of payment structures, and either I felt take advantage of if it was, I didn't think the fee was high enough or they were demanding too much time for the fee. We tried it in a place where if they prepaid for a package of hours and then we'd work through the hours and then we'd say, okay, we're out of hours. Do you want to pay for more? Like it got into a strange billing structure. So what I initially started off doing for the first year and a half or so of the business was that kind of a prepay model. And then if we, worked more than the prepay, we would bill the next hours the next month. And, it just wasn't scalable on a large scale. So what we ended up doing was just not billing the client for a month, working the hours for a month, and then billing them at the end of the month for only the hours worked. And once I did that, everyone was always clocking their time anyway, but it was able to, round in 6-minute increments. It's the way the clocking system was able to kind of keep things in whole numbers. And then just send them an invoice purely for that work. And if it was, we initially had problems with working either, too many hours or just more money than the client thought they would get to spend for the money that they, or the time that we needed to get the job done. So if they were in an open enrollment, they had some kind of big project happening. They had an issue with payroll taxes, something that just takes a lot of time, and they're just approving the time, but it ended up costing more money than they thought they wanted to spend. So we call, obviously, that sticker shock. So we get to the point of don't cause sticker shock. And so we ended up saying, okay, well, we're going to do a maximum budget rather than a minimum or any kind of retainer. And so we have clients that will spend as little as $150 or $500 a month, just kind of helping. We'll process payroll, we'll be on call, we'll do what they need for us, whatever we need to be doing for them. And then if it is a maximum, they can't spend more than $3,000 a month, we know what we can work up to and make sure that we're, getting things done. And what's nice about the system that we use, I'll actually plug and play. It's called Clockify. So for those of you that kind of do something similar or want to track your time against your project, or even see if you're making time makes sense for what you're charging, you can kind of keep track of it. And, obviously you don't have to turn all of the revenue numbers into your clients too, but you can track your billable time, your cost time, and keep that separate. And you can kind of literally see the different, like, I would say, codes and things like that inside the system. So it's a really good business tool to use. I don't know. But anyway, so what we did was we can set goals in the system, and we can tell if we're getting close to budget or over budget. So at any project code, we can see the percentage of getting to the goal. So if we're halfway through the month and we're over 50 or 60%, we can start to communicate to the client, we might go over budget, or if we keep going in this way of needing to get things done for you, is this too much money for you? Do you want us to continue to work or not? So that we have figured out through many, many trials and errors and upsetting many clients that has really worked out to be the most flexible and the most understanding for their budget and their company needs. But, I've been in this business now for 6 years, or almost 6 years. And it's definitely been some bumps and bruises with budgeting and numbers and pricing things right. I think as a lot of companies, how do they price things right? So that's been to be honest, that's been probably the most challenging part of this business.
Yeah. It's the hardest part. I mean, everybody likes to get an amazing service. They just don't always like to pay for it. So that's always the most challenging. Well, our show is really about stepping boldly into one's full potential, and Projecting Grandeur itself has a lot of different interpretations to it. But in your journey, what was the moment when you decided to truly project grandeur and lead to that place, or lead from that place, I should say?
And it was honestly probably a journey. I didn't necessarily think of myself as a business owner from probably a couple of years, to be honest. And I had been talking with, different business leaders and networking, and I had kind of been warned that when that shift happens, it can be kind of jolting. But you do have to switch your mindset from, as they say, working on your business versus working in your business. And it was right around the 2-year mark that I would have to get out of doing the work myself and start making sure other people were doing the work. And then that also shifted because I've been the primary salesperson for the company, is selling the other services of other people versus myself, and having to step away from being the one that promises the work's going to get done a certain way and being the one to perform that versus kind of helping others and make sure that they have what they need to perform the services and we live up to the promises and expectations that we're making. So it was definitely either it was kind of a gradual shift, but it definitely happened, I would say, pretty quickly within setting up the business. And I did lose clients if I was doing the work and tried to shift it to someone else that didn't perform the work the same way. We lost clients doing that. Once we started setting up clients from the very beginning and assigning them to the new people that they would be working with, then we were set after that. But setting expectations, if we didn't live up to expectations because we were still learning how to set expectations correctly, kind of falling on the sword and kind of trying again. So there was definitely putting your ego aside and making sure that you're really living up to that, your set of grandeur, essentially. You really have to, be humble and remember why you started business. What are you in business for? Keeping that vision in mind, and kind of just taking feedback genuinely and being open to that, and then shifting and growing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny. the in the business, on the business, and really specialist and generalist concept are something that we've talked about on the show a lot. And it's just refreshing and encouraging, I know, to a lot of our audience, because that those are natural shifts that people face. And it was the 2 year mark when you had that epiphany of that. So that's pretty cool. Uh, I know your business operates across a bunch of different verticals, healthcare, tech, construction, finance, real estate. Like there's a lot of different strategies associated to doing that. Like how do you handle those strategies in different environments while still maintaining that, amazing consistent excellence that you're known for?
I was lucky and I got to take that learning curve on someone else's dime. So, my first career in HR was in tech, and my second one was in residential construction. So I had a massive shift in industries and culture, and it honestly took me about 6 months to really understand the construction world, everything from the language that they're speaking and acronyms to the culture. The average age was very different, the mission and the vision. And, I would try to take some of what I had known from the tech space and bring it to that environment. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. And, like in the tech space, they were very colorful, literally. Like they would decorate for the holidays, they would throw, congratulation parties for each other. And when I got to the construction space, they didn't do any of that. And I tried to bring some of that to the environment, and some of it was not well received. I was like, but it's just decorations. We're going to decorate anyway. So I realized like a lot of it was like they just wanted to come to work, do their work. They really focused on building good homes for the community and things like that. So it was, the average age at the tech company was like 31. The average age at the construction company was like 40, almost 45, like 43. So it was very, very different in age ranges and things like that too. So um, once I learned that HR was very applicable to different industries, as long as you really understand the nuances of those industries, then it was kind of easy to shift, but you really have to understand human behavior to do that. And then my very first client was actually in healthcare. And so they did psychiatry and psychology in assisted living facilities. And so then I had to learn a whole new situation when it came to credentialing and the background checks. And that was right as COVID was coming in. I signed on with that client in October of 2019. So then just a few months later, we were all dealing with COVID. So good news, I had a few months before I had to deal with like everything that came with the COVID situation for that company too. But as we were hiring people and we would have their skill sets to bring on, they already came in with that kind of background and knowledge as well. And so we were able to start to expand and focus on the nuances of those industries. But really it came from the increase in the team members and being able to apply their expertise to the different industries and stay pretty industry agnostic. As a business, it worked out very well because we now have approximately 85 clients. And if any one industry is impacted, it doesn't impact our revenue as a whole. So, for example, when cryptocurrency was hit a few years ago, we had a couple clients that were significantly hit when it came to, they would go from being our biggest clients. We actually, physically had cryptocurrency companies and support companies for that industry. And, they were really, really struggling, but the rest of our businesses were fine. So were some of the situations that we started to learn early on to stay industry agnostic and continue to support businesses where we could. And now we have everything from nonprofits to obviously like private equity owned businesses, privately owned businesses, government entities. And it's more about, making sure that we can provide the right support. And some companies are willing to kind of deal with our learning curve, depending on it being a decently new client or new industry for us. And then, some things are close enough that we kind of get what we need to do for them. And the compliance issues that come with them, like government agencies, pretty much, everything is discoverable, emails and things like that, because they're it's a government agency. So there's certain things we can't put in writing and things we have to be very careful about communicating and how we support them, especially when it comes to HR compliance. So you just have to know the rules and regulations, which just comes with knowledge and experience.
Wow. A lot of nuances and a lot of different verticals. So good on you on keeping all that straight. Uh, so building a business is not just a skill, right? It's about vision, and oftentimes more so about vision. Like, how do you help your clients see the bigger picture for themselves, like inside of their organizations? Because that's got to be part of your role, I'm guessing.
It is. It depends on the scope that we have with the client. Sometimes they have us as like a VP of HR. So we do have several leaders in the business that work with the leadership team, and we become part of the leadership team, which is unique for an HR outsourcing firm. But a lot of times we've had our clients for many years, and we are ingrained as part of the system without having to be a part-time or even full-time person for them. And we give that kind of leadership guidance and business guidance in general. And a lot of times we end up having to remind them kind of like why they're in business, and especially if they're being impacted by outside forces. If the economy is changing, tariffs are impacting them, or whatever it might be that could be potentially something they can't control, focusing on what you can control. And if you have spread too thin, and I'm actually watching that too, because even for our own business, we have many, many different lines of services that we provide. And I've been able to do that through acquisition and been able to kind of make sure that I have a leader that is leading those different areas of the business. And small businesses don't always have that luxury to have a division leader or a department leader. And a lot of it is being ran by the CEO themselves. And if you are, not focusing on a core piece of your business and you start having these other ideas, which I've seen a lot of business leaders do, they just kind of focus really far on kind of like a squirrel. They're just like a shiny object. And so I don't know if you can hear that. There's like a backfire of a car. Anyway, so a lot of times with business leaders, if they kind of have the ADHD when it comes to their business and they just want to keep trying something new, and they just don't focus on what they went into business for, their businesses will usually it doesn't like downsize. It a lot of times I just see them not grow, and they just get stuck in a certain size because they don't focus on what is going to help them scale that business. So a lot of times we have to help them, kind of focus on, why is it a good place to work? Why are there people there? And why are their clients doing business with them? And then replicate that and kind of continue to show value where they can show value. And that is when, if you continue to keep that vision and structure alive, that's what's going to grow the business. If you also start chasing money, that's usually when it goes against you. If you go away from what you actually went to business and started the business for, and then just say, well, I just want to get rich quick scheme, and I just think I'm going to go make money doing this, or I can build a business and then sell it. Typically it's the wrong passion, it's the wrong reason, and you don't usually make the goals that you're trying to make. So I would say usually those are the lessons learned that we try to help them get through.
Makes sense. I want to double click into something that you mentioned here just a second ago. You talked about how you've grown through acquisition. And I'm just curious because there's a lot of our audience that is either contemplating or been part of an acquisition. How, like what are some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned in how to integrate the team and bring them in under one unified culture? Because that is a challenge a lot of our audience faces.
So a lot of times when business people are focusing on the acquisition, they forget about the people. They focus a lot on the assets and the money and the cost. And I've seen this in the many times I did acquisition, even as an HR practitioner. Like when I was at the tech company, they would be working on an acquisition for 6 months, 8 months. Like it takes a while to get all the pieces and parts. And HR is brought in at the very last 30 days. And they're like, by the way, we've acquired a company. You have 30 days to handle the people. And I'm like, It takes me 30 days to put them on benefits. Like I have to go get them right now, like yesterday, find out what they want for benefits and make sure the carriers can sign them up on time. And let alone the additional, liability insurance. We have to go add everything on the, additional, back end of everything, figure out the pay structures. I've had companies that were on semi-monthly versus bi-weekly. So you're getting paid on the different Fridays, your pay periods are different, and you have to figure out how to align all that. So while a lot of times as a business owner, you are focusing on the part of the business that is about, the client list and the business structure of everything, focusing on the people side is takes a lot of time. And so don't forget about that and how you're impacting people, because by the time you get to the point where you are sitting down and telling the people, because obviously they're kept in the dark and most people it's a big secret until the very end. If they're negatively impacted, obviously it's a huge culture shift. And there would be times where I would have to sit down with people like one-on-one to tell them, this is what's happened and this is the shift. That's almost like a onboarding meeting. And if they were treated unfairly, like if the benefits cost more than they were used to paying, now that's more money out of their paycheck. And what are you going to do to make that right? And so it ends up costing the company more money to try to right size people into, the cost of the benefits, or, difference in their salary or taxes or anything else that might happen based on where things are located out of. And so those are some of the things that initially are easy to control if you pay attention to and have the time to do the analytics behind that impact. And also an example of for my acquisition, I was acquiring a company where, someone had been there for a year already. And when I first sat down with her, she was like, well, I was going to be up for my 1-year anniversary. And, I was expecting a pay increase and stuff like that. And I went ahead and obviously honored that. And honored the tenure that she had with that company. And she came in with a lot of experience and expertise. And so we went ahead and gave her the pay increase like right away. So things like that, where it's like kind of just try to do right by people, that will, obviously help them to get on board a lot better and faster and, kind of be absorbed in the culture. Another thing is obviously the management structure is going to be different. We threw people into a department where that manager had no say in whether or not they were hired. And now they've got a bunch of new people, and asking the managers to do a lot of work and try to bring people up to speed that, they necessarily wouldn't have felt were qualified to do the job, and, try to give them a chance and things like that. And then another problem that we were working towards is taking on clients and supporting them in ways that made sense for how we were structured to support those businesses versus how the other company was structured to support them. And a lot of times they were on retainer and we do things hourly. Some things matched up and other services did not. So we had some like leadership coaching and that all aligned, recruiting aligned, but some of the business ops didn't really align, and they were, kind of on a retainer. So we had to kind of figure out how to, try to keep the clients happy too. And some of it, we ended up just working out the contract and the contracts weren't renewed, versus some contracts were easily renewed and it was a continuity along the way. So there was a lot of lessons learned on my side when it came to the people, and the clients as well. And I would say, the takeaways that I would advise is, to be obviously pretty thoughtful when it comes to not only how you're going to communicate to everybody, but, having those individual meetings with clients and giving them a lot of options and, those kinds of things where it's, versus like hush hush and everything is like all told in a press release and no one knows anything till everything is public, can end up kind of damaging the culture and people feel like they've been an outsider to their own company.
Yeah, those are really great points. Real quick on grandeur again. So it's not about ego. We think of it as like an impact. And as you look at your business, how do you guys measure, and define what real world impacts your work, are helping your clients do? Like, how do you measure that on your side?
A lot of times we can help them by understanding like their own growth. And there's a lot of ROIs that can happen from the HR side, obviously reduce turnover, and the employment satisfaction. And so there's some areas of there's some of it can be soft skill kind of measure, others it can be pretty hard numbers. Um, and if they reduce turnover, not only is that everyone knows there's a cost to turnover, but the other part of that is if they're not turning over and they are sticking around, then your client satisfaction is usually increased, your culture is more controlled, and you'll naturally be able to get more work out of the people that are there because they will have more skills and the longevity with the business. And the I would say like the day-to-day workload that you have, or just getting along with your coworkers, are easily known. If someone is, kind of quiet quitting and they're just not living up to the expectations and not performing, and you are negatively impacting the culture and things like that, we usually have to help people not identify them, identify what's causing a toxic culture, how to handle it fairly. Because if you, let's say, leave a toxic manager in a seat and you're not addressing it, then you're going to obviously you start losing the people underneath that manager, and everybody else in the company sees that this person can get away with things, and they don't want to stick around in that culture either. So, kind of identifying what's causing certain situations and then how to solve them. But then you can start to measure like the results out of that just by, longevity with the business, and obviously client satisfaction and revenue and things like that can increase when you pay attention and invest into the human aspect side of it. You also decrease your risk. So a lot of times there's what doesn't get talked about a lot is HR has employment laws wrapped all around it. There isn't anything HR can't touch without an employment law. And so there's tons of risk. So if there's, if you aren't doing something correctly, you're exposing the company to a lot of risk. And then there's a lot of companies that have, issues if they do end up with some kind of fine, or government entity knocking on their door. And so that's also something we can help them, mitigate their risk and make sure that they kind of stay out of trouble when it comes to stuff like that too.
Yeah, nobody wants that knock, so that's good. Uh, you know, outside of business, you're pretty active in philanthropy. When you think about how has giving back really influenced your approach as a leader and as growth, like how do you think those two align, and how has it shaped you?
I've always tried to stay involved in the community. And so it would either be through, volunteer work, or, giving back time or money to the community that meant something to me and things like that. One of the organizations that I really enjoyed being a part of is High Hopes and High Heels. And that is where it's a group of women, and their focus will change every year. So there's different philanthropies focuses that I really enjoyed. So we would do different things with different children organizations or hospitals, a victim's home, things like that I really found rewarding, because it wasn't always the same area of the community that would get help and support. And I got exposed to a lot of different resources and things like that I didn't even know were in my own community. So those were some things that I personally liked. And I would say the thing that shaped me the most is I think it keeps a lot of like empathy involved when it comes to business. Like, I hate it when people say, well, if the business doesn't care about me, why should I care about it? And I could, leave tomorrow and it wouldn't matter. And while that is true, people do come and go from businesses, and we still have to continue to run a business. It doesn't mean that we didn't care about you and that you don't contribute to the organization. So it's something where you kind of need to see people as people, regardless of what may be happening in their life, or, making sure that you are supporting them when they're going through something difficult. My husband is a Shriner. And so we do quite a bit with the Shriners hospitals. And so those are, I've seen parents and children going through very, very difficult situations. And obviously with my own employees having, health problems with their families, or they've got different changes and challenges with themselves or their family. And so while we're not very big as far as having to be forced to give FMLA and things like that, like a lot of companies, they don't have leave policies, and we're still pretty small when it comes to how many people we have. We still stay really flexible. We want people to know that they're cared about and that they have, a space to work. So I try to kind of take that same kind of stance when it comes to how I treat my people and the kind of work environment flexibility we can give them, and make sure that if they need to shift in their job or career path, or something like that, to help take care of their family, we try to make sure that they have the right support that we can give them. So it's definitely like the work that I do in the community and the philanthropy that I enjoy being a part of has significantly impacted how I interact with people. And same kind of thing with my travel, because I tend to travel internationally a lot too. So that has really helped me be a lot more respectful and understanding of different religions and different backgrounds, and pay attention to what holidays are important to people, and give a lot of flexibility for that too, which I think that doesn't necessarily get talked a lot about. So if we obviously as a company, we would observe Christmas Day and Christmas Eve, that didn't matter so much to the Jewish community, so we would flip their days to something else that was more important to them. And same kind of thing if it was just another holiday nearby, we'd flip it. So those are some of the things that I think we would listen to them, and that kind of thing too, and pay attention to what's important to them.
Very cool. Well, I like hearing that perspective. I'll put all of your contact information and links inside of the post, but just for anyone listening that may not have time to read the post itself, what's the easiest way for people to get a hold of you?
Griffin-resources.com.
Awesome. Well, Michelle, I love hearing your story, love hearing the growth. And as an entrepreneur, I'm very happy that there are people like you around that can help make HR something that we can navigate, because it is truly a challenging thing for a lot of business owners. So appreciate what you do. And thanks for joining the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciated the time.
You bet. To everyone else, keep projecting your grandeur. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Take care.